Thanks a lot. I'm Luke Kratz. I'm a senior principal engineer at Bazaarvoice, and I like to build AI apps. And like many of you, I use AI in my everyday work and personal life to make things easier. But after nearly 20 years of working in AI, from academia to startups to now leading AI at Bazaarvoice, I've learned a hard truth. AI kind of stinks. And I'm not just being provocative. The AI hype consistently outpaces the reality for everyday users. Instead of empowering us, AI often completely misses the mark and just adds another layer of complexity. But don't just take my word for it. Let's see it together. I'd like everyone to raise your hand if your company has a strategic goal to become more AI-driven this year. Don't be shy. Yeah, mine does too. Great, a lot of us, right? We're all afraid of being left behind, so we have to be buzzword compliant, right? Now, I'd like you to raise your hand again if AI has actually transformed your business. I saw one. I saw okay, a couple. A lot less though, right? like maybe three. We all want to be AI-driven, but none of us have actually been transformed. That gap between the strategic mission and the day-to-day reality is exactly why AI stinks. So what's up with this disconnect? The primary reason why AI stinks is misalignment. Misalignment is a fundamental mismatch between the AI technology and the actual needs, expectations, and intentions of its users. And misalignment's easy to spot. I saw it myself while preparing for this talk. I wanted some help formatting my talk track because my font sizes were inconsistent, so I asked Gemini to do it. And Gemini says, "I'm sorry, I cannot fulfill this request. I do not have the ability to change the font size or style of text in a Google document." Like, are you kidding me? Why are you even here? Gemini missed my core need entirely and instead offered me some reading comprehension questions on the document that I just wrote. Thank you, Gemini. I'll come back when it's time to prepare for the 11+. But this is a perfect example of a copilot that adds complexity without utility. It's a distraction. We've seen distracting office assistants before, and it didn't go so well. And this pattern is extremely common. The AI performs a superficial task instead of addressing the actual user's needs. So why does this happen to so many different AI tools? Misalignment comes from the AI not grasping the user's intent and not being architected to fulfill it. Copilots are designed for general purpose, and thus they lack the sophistication to understand the nuance of real-world individual needs. And we've seen this problem before. In the 1940s, the US Air Force found that pilots kept crashing their planes. And after digging deep, they figured out the problem. The cockpit was designed for the average pilot. And in practice, that means no pilot fit in the cockpit. The Air Force discovered the flaw of averages. Today's AIs are similar. Copilots are designed for the average user. They don't understand different work functions in a given business, let alone an individual person. And as a result, they don't really work for anyone. Let me show you an example from Bazaarvoice. I'd like you to meet my colleague, Austin Rinder, in sales. He doesn't know his picture's up here, by the way. Austin loves delivering impactful pitches, but he's bogged down curating, sourcing, and customizing slide decks. His real value is the strategic thinking to align our offerings with the prospect's needs, yet he's buried in PowerPoint. And you might be thinking a generative AI that can create some slides from existing content is the perfect fit for Austin. And I totally agree. But his current tools like Microsoft Copilot or Google Gemini have no concept of the specialized slide library or generator that he desperately needs. And this is just one example. I have another colleague, Nina LaRouche, our Director of Revenue Enablement, who saw our team struggling with up-to-date intelligence on our competitors. This was especially true for new, smaller competitors that have just entered the market and we may have never heard of. Nina created a prompt for on-the-fly competitive battle cards that made it easy for our reps to position Bazaarvoice against an ever-changing landscape. But there were a few problems. At the time, you couldn't share gems. We were using Google Gemini, so people had to paste the prompt out of a Word doc. And worse, though Gemini could download web pages, it can't truly crawl a domain to get the deep competitive feature data that we need to generate these battle cards. In other words, Our generic tools, again, fell short. They were designed for the average user, and they didn't work for her and her team. And those are just two examples. I could add myself in there as well. As an engineer, I have a totally different need that's unmet by generic tools. And these are just 3 roles. At Bazaarvoice, we have dozens of roles. Part of my role at Bazaarvoice is talking to employees about how AI can impact their work. And after talking to hundreds of employees, I found it's crystal clear. Every single person has unique needs that could be addressed by AI, but the generic tools fall short. Even people in the same role have different needs because they do their job differently. Ultimately, this means the perfect AI assistant is the one that thinks just like you. And since everyone's unique, truly empowering ourselves means we need effectively as many copilots as we have employees. And I want to solve every employee's problem and make their lives better. I'd love to build an AI for each of them. But at minimum, it takes me 2 weeks or more to code it up, even with the latest vibe coding agents. And I currently have a backlog of 91 ideas. That's 2 weeks each. That's a 3-year commitment for me to code up, just for some little tools for slide generation and everything. That's the wall I hit. I simply cannot deliver custom AI at the speed that our employees need it. This led me to a crucial question. What if transforming humans isn't about more generic tools, but about radically changing how we build AIs? What if we could build AIs much, much faster? So I started exploring this question with off-the-shelf agentic platforms like Diffie and Flowise, but I ran into a bunch of problems. First, I'm limited to the connectors and plugins they support, and since most of them are new, I found gaps right away. Second, there's no opportunity to scale it. If I need to run a billion-point data set through one of those things, it's just going to fall apart. And finally, they all focus on agents, which are great, but that's just one design pattern in my tool belt. What happens when chain-of-thought reasoning isn't enough, or it's not the right answer? Then I'm stuck. Despite these shortcomings, the tools are still great. I encourage you to try them out if you have a similar problem. They'll get you going fast, but they didn't completely solve my problem of needing to build hundreds of AIs quickly. They gave me all the information connectors I needed in the world, but they locked down the architecture. So I'm going to pause here and do a little activity to illustrate what I mean by architecture. I've talked a lot about how AI can augment Bazaarvoice employees. Now I want you guys to try it. I want you to think about one frustrating manual pain point in your job, something you're still doing by hand that you wish an AI could do for you. Just one thing. Now take a minute, I'm going to stop talking, turn to the person next to you, and figure out what you would need to provide an AI to do that for you. What data, input, steps, tools, and systems does the AI need to produce the right output? Go ahead. Don't be shy. Okay, so by a show of hands, how many of you found that the most valuable part of that exercise wasn't describing the problem, but identifying the information and strategies needed for AI to solve it? Raise them high. Come on, a couple of you. Yeah, okay, so that's amazing. Those of you who just raised your hands, you are now an AI engineer. And how do I know this? Because you just did the most important part of my job. Understanding a problem, what information is needed to solve it, and how to architect that solution. That's the key. And the high-value part of engineering is not the code, right? It's figuring out that information architecture, how the data and the AI building blocks fit together to solve a unique problem. This is the problem-solving part of engineering that humans will and always will be necessary for. When I talk to Bazaarvoice employees about their toils, I usually leave the meeting with an architecture in mind. And that got me thinking. I asked myself, why was I spending 99% of my time coding the idea? I mean, partly because I like coding, it was fun. But the true value was in the architecture that I had sketched out in my head. So that got me thinking, what if I could go from information architecture to an application right away? I could look at a problem, come up with a solution, and have that solution immediately. That would be amazing, right? Be awesome. That was the idea behind QType. QType is a domain-specific language that Bazaarvoice is open sourcing for architecting AI applications. The name is short for quick prototype. You specify the information architecture, and then you're done. That's it. Your application is ready to go. Let me show you what I mean by creating Nina's battle card example in QType. That was the perfect example of a problem whose return on investment wasn't worth 2 weeks of development. Let's see if QType can help. So first, I'm going to create a new QType application file. All application files are entirely declarative and written in YAML. Applications have one or more data pipelines or flows, each of which can have multiple steps. Here, I'm just going to define a single flow that generates a battle card. One nicety for all you engineering nerds out there is that we've uploaded the spec to schemastore.org. So if you have the YAML extension installed in VS Code, you get syntax checking for free. There's no extra plugins or anything you need to do. It just works. But I want to see the architecture that I'm building. I want to look at more YAML. If I type the command qtype visualize, it dumps a mermaid flowchart of my architecture for me to keep up while I'm working on it. I'll keep this up as we build. So the first step, I want to crawl a competitor's website. I only want the user to have to provide the URL. That's all they should need to do. And for this application, I'm going to use a service called Tavily that scrapes websites and converts it into LLM-ready content. You might think, oh, that means you got to connect QType into Tavily, right? How do we do that? At that point, you might think we need some plugins or something like that. But I don't really want QType to have a lot of connectors built in, because then I'd just be competing with those agentic platforms, and it's a road we don't want to go down. But Tavily has an open API spec. So with QType, I can just say QType convert API, and it creates a list of a QType file with tools for each endpoint and their shapes. So any service that has an open API spec can connect into the QType architecture. Then I can import that file into my application under references. That lets me keep the common libraries common, separate from my application specifics. So this is pretty great. I can call any API that publishes an open API spec. I bind my variables to the inputs and outputs in the endpoint, and I'm ready to call Tavily to download all the information from the provided competitor. But Bazaarvoice releases new products too, so I'll add that information as well. For this demo, I just used Tavily to scrape our website here for the demo, but you could plug in your own knowledge base or slide decks, anything you want. Next, I'll take both those pieces of information and leverage Nina's prompt that she wrote in that Word document to generate the battle card. Here I'll once again use the import call, but I'm specifying its raw text so that it doesn't try to render it as YAML. Now that I'm specifying note that I'm specifying the inputs here in the QType file, but the prompt itself has little formatting strings to tell it where it should go in the context. And finally, I'll do inference on that prompt by passing it to an LLM. Here I use AWS Bedrock, but QType will support all major vendors. I might even put LiteLM in there for a while. And that's it. That's our information architecture, right? This is how I would solve the competitive battle card problem. It took me maybe a minute or so to spec that out, yeah? So my work should be done, right? Well, actually it is. QType comes with an interpreter that runs the QType application using Llama Index. I can say, hey, QType, run this, specify the input domain, and boom. I get the competitive battle card instantly. So this is pretty great. You can try different architectures, iterate on your application at lightning speed. But a command line call doesn't make it necessarily connectable or usable. There we go. I can also type qtype serve, and it'll start a web server that will surface my flows as different API endpoints. And I can plug that into other systems that need a little AI magic, or maybe Slack. And since it uses Swagger, we get open API spec for free again. But this is supposed to speed up my coworkers, and they don't want to be hitting an API. Well, the web server also runs a Next.js GUI, so you can go to the website, enter the competitor's domain, and boom, you have an instant battle card. This is the game changer. Now Nina's team can have a custom AI to make their lives better, and it only took me a few minutes to build. The UI also supports conversational chats if your application needs it. You might be thinking, okay, this is getting pretty good, Lou, but that looked pretty easy. But how do I iterate? How do I debug? Qtip also comes with observability built in. You specify your OpenTelemetry sync, and everything gets sent there. Here I'm showing an open source Arise Phoenix telemetry software, so you can keep track of all the traces, prompts, everything that went through, record feedback, and debug any issues or iterate on your prompt. So this was pretty amazing. I'm really excited about this. It's a passion project of mine. With QType, we can go from information architecture instantly to a fully fledged app that addresses your specific needs. At Bazaarvoice, this is going to reduce my 2-week prototype time to nearly 2 minutes. This enables the shift. It means we can build the perfect copilot that thinks just like each and every one of you. So we began today by confronting a hard truth. AI, despite its promises, often adds complexity, and they're fundamentally misaligned with how people work. But we've also seen a clear path forward. Unlocking AI's true 10x potential lies not in generic copilots, but empowering people with hundreds of small, rapidly developed, tailored AI solutions. We're open sourcing QType and targeting early November for an initial release. But I do have one more fun thing to show you. Since QType has a schema, and the schema is specified in JSON, you can give that structure to an LLM and have it generate the YAML for you. Here, I've asked GitHub Copilot to create a simple QType chatbot to help me make a family decision about adopting a dog. I sped this video up since Sonnet 4 is a little slow, but the whole thing took 2 minutes and 22 seconds to run, hands-off keyboard. And you can see it creates a YAML file, visualizes the architecture, creates a launch configuration, and then we can launch the website, and it's ready to go. You can run it and see that website anywhere. Now, you're not off the hook. You are still the engineer, the information architect. You still have to think about your architecture. But that's all you have to do. Think about it. And QType can help you realize that vision immediately. So I hope I've enabled you to feel like you're living in 2025 instead of having yet another Clippy that adds complexity over utility. I'd like to challenge you to find a task that you hate, the busy, burdensome toil that drags us down, and identify the information that an AI needs to do it for you. And I hope by open sourcing QType, you can take your architecture to application instantly. So please take QType, use it, and go build your personal army of individual copilots. Thank you.